Genesis chapter 29. Then Jacob went on his journey, and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. For out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in its place. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him. And he said unto them, Is he well? And they said, He is well. And behold, Rachel his daughter cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is yet high day, neither is it time that the cattle should be gathered together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, until they roll the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. And while he yet spake with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, that Jacob went near, and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. And Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice, and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him, and embraced him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. And Laban said unto Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy wages be? And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the elder was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And Jacob loved Rachel, and said, I will serve thee 7 years for Rachel, thy younger daughter. And Laban said, It is better that I give her to thee, than that I should give her to another man. Abide with me. And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. And Jacob said to Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place, and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter, and brought her to him, and he went in unto her. And Laban gave unto his daughter Leah Zilpah his maid for an handmaid. And it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, What is this thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? And Laban said, It must not be so done in our country, to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet another 7 years, yet 7 other years. And Jacob did so, and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid for her to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. And when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived, and bare a son. And she called his name Reuben, for she said, Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. And she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon. And she conceived again, and bare a son, and said, Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi. And she conceived again, and bare a son, and she said, Now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. Summarizing chapter 29, Jacob arrived, saw people who placed a rock over the well after each use. They were giving water to the flock of lambs. Jacob asked these men, Where are you from? They said, Haran. He asked, Do they know Laban? They said, Yes. And here comes his daughter Rachel. She keeps the sheep. The men Jacob was talking to waited for all the flock to arrive before giving the sheep water. When Rachel walked up, Jacob moved the rock and watered her flock. Jacob told Rachel who he was. Rachel told her father Laban, who was happy to embrace Jacob. After living with Laban for 1 month, he asked what wages did Jacob want. Jacob said he'll serve Laban 7 years for Rachel. Laban agrees. Jacob worked the 7 years, which seemed like a few days in verse 20. And then he tells Laban, I fulfilled my duty. Give me my wife so I can be with her. He was talking about getting in them draws. Give me my wife so I can get it. Laban celebrated with a feast, and then he gave Jacob Leah, the older daughter, and gave Leah Zilpah as a handmaiden. In verse 25, Jacob realizes he slept with Leah. When he wakes up, he confronts Laban, and Laban tells him that it's customary to give the firstborn for marriage, but he can have Rachel if he worked another 7 years. So he earned Rachel. And Laban gave Rachel Bilhah for a handmaiden. Jacob obviously loved Rachel more. He served 7 more years with Laban after that. The Lord opened Leah's womb when he saw Jacob hated her, and Rachel was labeled as barren. In chapter 31, verse 31, Rachel was labeled barren. In verse 35, Leah had 5 sons for Jacob. So, highlights for this chapter: rock was over the well, which seems like a pretty good idea to filter out impurities and other animals that probably get in the water. It's the first time we've seen that mentioned. And then Jacob moved this heavy rock for Rachel. Jacob was thought of as a man who dwelt in the tents. He wasn't a robust physical man like Esau. But some, men will naturally take on physical tasks for women more often than not. Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah. He worked 14 years for Rachel. This was payback for tricking Esau. You never know what harvest your seeds will bloom. Jacob stole a birthright, and Laban stole Jacob's years of life. You never know how it's. Karma is not a Christian concept, even though the idea is still the same. When you do something, you don't know how it's going to come back. So you might be a thief in one way, and time gets stolen from you. So, very, very thing to remember. Verse 30, Leah was hated, so the Lord opened her womb. Rachel was deemed barren, just like Sarah and Rebekah. In chapter 29, verse 17, Rachel was deemed barren. In chapter 24, verse 16, Rebekah was deemed barren. In chapter 12, verse 14, Sarah was deemed barren. But all of them were deemed fair. Beautiful. But labeled barren. And barren just means not produced. You haven't produced anything. But when we look at these women who have produced, they're never mentioned as beautiful. In chapter 16, verse 1, Hagar was mentioned, but never described as beautiful. In chapter 22, verse 20, Milcah was not mentioned as beautiful, and she had 8 children. Chapter 25, verse 1, Keturah was not mentioned as beautiful, and she had 6 children. And Abraham spent his whole life with the promise that he would be a father of great nations, and she wasn't even written about more than a chapter. She had 6 children. Chapter 29, verse 17, Leah was not mentioned as fair, not beautiful. She had 4 children at this point, at the end of Genesis chapter 29, and still Rachel had none. So just a point to be made about this work right now. Next will be chapter 30.